Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you for another Film Fanatic video. It's Monday at about 11:25. Pretty rainy, stormy, cold day. It's been raining all day yesterday. Massive rainstorms, and it's been really chilly. But aside from that, yesterday was a pretty cool day, pretty awesome day. I went back to my favorite shop, my home away from home, Bull Moose Music, in Waterville, Maine. I went with a friend who I hadn't hung out with in quite a while. Really cool friend of mine. We used to hang out all the time, and we met up and drove to Waterville, and then we went out to this killer Indian place in Waterville. I think it's called Village of India. It's right in downtown, about five or 10 minutes away from Bull Moose, and it was great. It was a pretty stormy, rainy, crappy day, and and then we were at Bull Moose for a few hours, quite a while, and then we went to dinner and didn't realize, wow, it was like 5:30, and we actually got there right at more or less dinner time, and it was great, super fun day, and I super excited because I got a movie that I've been wanting to get for a very long time, and I've heard a lot about it. I never seen it. I always heard that this was probably one of the most the most, as far as like horror slasher exploitation movies, probably the movie I've been wanting to see the most actually in quite a long time. It's a movie I've been really excited about, and that is Black Christmas. This is a Canadian horror exploitation movie, and I had heard about this movie for a few years now. Never seen it for some reason. I never got to see it growing up, as it came out in the 70s. It was pretty much an instant cult classic. It came out in 1974, which is just crazy, crazy. And I was super excited because I picked up this really amazing edition. It's a used edition for like 13 bucks. And it is just killer. Like, it has hours. It comes with two discs. There's 2 hours, or should say 2 discs, and there's probably like 5 hours of special features. There's interviews with all the filmmakers, everybody involved with the film, the cast, from the production to the actors, the writers, the director, just everything. And there's two really awesome Q&A clips on here that really go in depth, and there's actually a really great documentary that's about that I've watched quite a few of the special features on here. I still have quite a few other ones to check out, but the one I did watch, is it's like a 40-minute length documentary essentially about Black Christmas. And I had heard about this movie, like, again, like I said, for a long time I heard it was heralded as like one of the greatest slasher movies, one of the movies that really helped define the slasher genre, if not put it on the map. They came out in 74, so it predated so many movies that came out in the late 70s and especially the 80s, which was like about 78, 79 to about 86, 87. That's pretty much the period, and those 2 decades, the late 70s and mid to late 80s, like that was like an explosion of slasher movies in the exploitation world, which is my favorite genre. And the other thing too, this is a Canadian slasher movie. I've been unaware too until recently how pretty incredible the whole like Canadian slasher exploitation world, and how vast it was and how many great movies came out of Canada in the 70s and 80s. Like it's crazy. I mean, you have like iconic directors like David Cronenberg. I did a show on Shivers, which was his first movie that he did in the early 70s. An amazing low budget exploitation movie. Definitely 100% a creepy kind of horror exploitation movie. And I also did a show on another movie I discovered, which is also Canadian, called The Siege, which is kind of one of my favorite movies. That movie is so awesome. I had never seen that one before. I had never seen Shivers before. I've been really familiar with Cronenberg, but I had never seen Shivers. And David Cronenberg's always been one of my favorites. And then, of course, the one movie I did see that I did watch growing up all the time, which is one of my all-time favorite slasher movies, which happens to be Canadian also, is the original My Bloody Valentine. And then, but during this whole time where I've been buying a lot of these Blu-rays, that's where I kept hearing more and more about Black Sunday, that or Black Christmas, that it is, one of the, if you're a fan of horror and one of the, and a fan of slasher films in particularly, and really just anything horror related, this movie is like I had heard from lots of folks online and just reading reviews and just little things in my travels, that this movie was like an essential movie, like one of the most important movies in the genre. And I had never seen it for some reason. I never I think I had heard about it when I was a kid, but I'd never seen it. It came out in '74, and it was a movie that again I had never seen. Heard lots of amazing things about it, and it's been really hyped up as being, one of the greatest movies ever, and also to a degree being heralded as, putting the slasher genre on the map. Like there obviously were slasher movies that came out before, to a degree. Movies like there were movies such as, for example, movies that kind of predated Black Christmas, The Flesh Blood Show in 1972, Scream Bloody Murder, which came out in '73, which I do believe I have seen. But also another film called Pigs in 1973, Hands of the Ripper, which is another films, and I definitely say that the Italian directors were doing more of these kinds of films, obviously, that predated, to a degree, Black Christmas. But I also look at Herschel Gordon Lewis. One movie I think of that I definitely consider to be a slasher movie is Blood Feast. And also, one movie I would say predates this movie by quite a few years is Color Me Blood Red by one of my favorite directors, Herschel Gordon Lewis. And that came out in '65. And I look at that as definitely being a slasher movie. So it's interesting. But as far as I guess the model, or taking the kind of this real fundamental blueprint of what a slasher film is, I kind of think almost that this is that movie that really did that. Like I said, I use these examples, with some of the Italian films and some of the films that came out in early '70s, but particularly from Italy, and then Herschel Gordon Lewis, for example, some of his films, Blood Feast, and also Color Me Blood Red, as being definitely slasher movies to a degree. Especially, I would say Color Me Blood Red is definitely more on the lines of a slasher movie. And those came out in the '60s. But definitely, the one thing I have to say is all the hype I've heard about this movie and all the things that I've heard about how just incredible that this movie is. It's it was better than I thought it would be. I was completely floored by this movie. I was completely blown away that I've never seen this movie, and I kicked myself. And I'm so excited that I'd been looking for this movie for quite a while. And when I went to Blue Moose and I saw this, and when I first went over to to start looking. Usually when I go to Bull Moose, I'll like check out the music selection first, and maybe pick out a couple of CDs, and then I'll go over to the movie selection. And I had gotten some albums and things like that, and then as soon as I walked over to the movies area, the horror Blu-ray selection, I saw this right there, and I was just like, no way, and I was super excited. And I have to say, all of the hype, all of the positive things that I've heard about this film, it surpasses that. It's I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's just, it's the thing about this movie too is how the atmosphere is so incredibly creepy. It's so beautifully shot. It's actually got some really great writing to the story. The story is pretty straightforward, but the level of suspense is phenomenal. The way the film was shot, the direction, the kills are amazing. The ending is just fantastic. The music for this film is off the chain. Like but it's just really, like I've said, I'm such a fan of like when a film has atmosphere and creates a certain kind of vibe. And this movie really takes that to a whole nother level. And this film, it was directed by Bob Clark, who directed A Christmas Carol, and he also directed or A Christmas Story, which was like which is regarded as a family Christmas movie and a family Christmas classic. He also did like the Porky's movies, but he did a whole slew of other films. But this movie is just unbelievable. Like, it's next level. Uh, Wonderful cast. Olivia Hussey, who went on to become a pretty famous actress, I believe, after this movie. And the iconic Lois Lane herself, Margaret Kidder, was in this film, which I didn't realize. Amazing. And John Saxon, another real famous character actor. Keir Dullea, who was actually in 2001 Space Odyssey, which is like unbelievable. And I never think I've seen him in a few other films besides Stanley Kubrick's Space Odyssey, 2001, but I didn't realize he's like one of the leads in this movie, and he's got a lot of screen time, and he's amazing in this. Lynn Griffin is also just incredible. Marion Waldman, Art Hindle, yeah, just an incredible cast, and I'm like, why have I? Why did it take me this long to see this film? I mean, it's really like high level. It's definitely super low budget, super creepy. It doesn't have copious amounts of gore. It does at times, but it's so creative, and I think it was really due to the whole like the low budget nature of this film. But I was just flat out blown away by how incredible this movie is. And like I've said many times before, the slasher genre is my all-time favorite genre, and this is now one of my all-time favorite movies. My favorite slasher film of all time is Bill Luswig's Maniac, and that came out in 1979. So this predated that by quite a few years. But man, this movie is just amazing. It's so entertaining. The atmosphere is so great, and it's got some pretty fun, like comedic humor in the movie also. But the cinematography is just amazing, and it's one of the most atmospheric movies I've ever seen. The transfer of this film on Blu-ray 4K is astounding. This particular edition of it, I've never seen it. Like I said, I've never seen it before. It's interesting too because it comes with two versions of the film. It has the new Blu-ray 4K updated version, which I watched last night, and I just watched this last night for the very first time. And like I said, this is now one of my all-time favorite slasher movies. I mean, it's a masterpiece. The other thing that's kind of interesting too is it comes with, I think in the about 15 or 20 years ago, there was a remastered version of this movie, but on DVD or VHS. And there's also that version on here too, which is a little bit more grainy and gritty. But the transfer of the Blu-ray 4K film is just that edition is just unbelievable. The mix. I have a pretty awesome man cave here, and I got a subwoofer and and I have like 4 surround sound speakers, and the mix is the audio mix for the soundtrack is just astounding. Like it's unbelievable. It sounds like where from a technological standpoint, it feels like it's really like it was remastered with such a modern in such a modern context where you really get the full panning, you get the kind of the Doppler effect, you get the full kind of immersive experience. A lot of the times with like newer films, especially Blu-ray 4K, that is one of the pluses of owning a lot of those movies. Like one movie in particular that I think is just incredible on Blu-ray, as far as where you're if you have a pretty good sound system, you know it's really pushing that sound, but you're getting every aspect of what that movie is and what your setup can do. Is Robert Eggers' The Witch, and that's like a newer film, and it's so the technology for mastering and the production side on the production side of things is actually obviously a lot higher than it was in the 70s, but this film is right up there with it. I mean, considering that this came out in 74, it's unbelievable. Like it truly is. um, it's it's definitely one of the best produced transfers I've ever seen. And again, the score is just incredible. The score was composed by Carl Zitterer. Again, I never heard of him. I never have checked out any of his other work that he's worked, the other films that he's worked on. Um, what a nice surprise that this was. And again, like I said, the production of this is just amazing. The the quality of the video is so crystal clear. It's unbelievable. Carl, the composer for Black Christmas, Carl Zitterer is he had a pretty huge career. Again, I just discovered him. Just discovered this movie, Children Shouldn't Play, which came out in 72. Of course, Black Christmas, 74. Daydream in 74. Prom Night, I didn't realize he directed another killer, uh, iconic slasher movie in 1980. Deranged in 74. And he also did Porky's. Uh, just amazing. Just amazing. Um, and this, without a doubt, lives up to all the hype I have that I've heard about this film. And I'm very much I can't wait to watch this film again. And again, Robert Clark, the director, just unbelievable. I grew up watching some of the Porky's movies, but for some reason I never saw Black Christmas. And he directed Porky's in 1981, the sequel Porky's 2: The Next Day in 1983, Baby Geniuses in 99, Death Dream in 74, Children Shouldn't Play also, Super Baby Geniuses, just crazy, crazy. But the high level of direction in this film, the camera angles, and like I mentioned too, he also did a Christmas Story, which is just crazy. Like, one of the most iconic Christmas movies ever that came out in 1983. Rhinestone with Sylvester Stallone '84, Dolly Parton and Sylvester Stallone. My Summer Story in 1994, She-Man in 1967. So he definitely did like pretty well-known, big budget Hollywood movies, but he also did quite a few exploitation movies. Um, but wow, what a discovery! I'm so excited that I bought this, and it's definitely one of it's right at the top right now as far as one of my favorite movies of all time. So excited to watch this again. So yeah, I highly recommend if you're a fan of slasher movies or horror movies in particular, this is essential. Like this really is. I didn't realize too. There's a really great interview with Bob Clark. He passed away unfortunately a few years ago. He was in a really terrible car accident. But there's an interview with him on here that's so interesting about how he was pretty close to John Carpenter, and I didn't realize that John Carpenter loved this film so much and really thought that this was one of the most important horror movies, and this went on to really inspire him to create Halloween. And considering that this predated Halloween, because Halloween came out in '79, so by quite a few years, just wild, like and so an iconic movie, for a an iconic period, and the '70s, '80s being the height of the slasher exploitation world, like one of the most important movie that went on to inspire so many great directors in the slasher genre. Black Christmas, 1974. So this is Jason Dean. Definitely check this out if you've never seen it. Like I was that one of those people, and it's amazing, amazing. So thanks again, and keep the comments coming. And if you like this page, please continue to subscribe and all that good stuff. All right, peace.